Okay, welcome back to the beginner fly tying series. This is video number 3. As you can see, it's a little different format because we're now onto the vise, onto the bench.
That's a big brown.
So my vise is a pretty fancy one. This is a Renzetti Master Vise. As we talked about, as long as your vise holds a hook, you're good to go. But we're going to give you some do's and don'ts on when you put your hook in the vise to help your vise live a long, healthy life, and also to give you the best opportunity to get to where you need to on your hook to tie in the materials you need to. Okay, so first things first, on the Renzetti, for example, you have a tightening knob here, and then you have a cam lever here. That's similar in many different vices. Sometimes there's a plunger system that just clamps around the hook. Anyway, long story short, you need to find out with your vise what the sweet spot is to hold a wide variety of hooks. And with the Renzetti, I'm going to take my hook and I'm not going to tighten this knob so tight that it just holds on its own. Okay, I'm going to loosen that a little bit so that this hook kind of goes in and out easily without catching. And then I'm going to take this lever on the bottom and I'm just going to move it upward. All right, so I don't need to mash this lever all the way into the back of the vise. That's plenty of leverage to hold this hook. As you can see, I'm wiggling the hook. I could break that hook off, no issues. Okay, if I were to move to a larger hook, as you can see, this one's quite a bit bigger. It has thicker wire, and also the working surface, the shank that we're going to work with, is kind of further away from the hook point. So it's not critical that we put it so far close to the point of the jaws like we did the small fly. And more importantly, if you put too much pressure right on the tips of your jaw, it will damage your jaws. That goes for any vise out there. If you put too much pressure on your jaws, you're just weakening your jaws. So on this one, again, I'm going to open up the front part of the jaw. And as you can see with this hook, I'm pushing it way further back into the vise. And now I can just take my cam lock lever or my cam lever parallel to the table. Again, I have 100% lockdown. I could probably do that one a little closer like that. And, you know, it holds really well. So mess around with your vise. A couple things that I've seen is people taking a hook and putting it in the vise like this, okay? And they think, okay, that just keeps the hook point out of the way. I won't poke myself. I won't ding my thread. This is not a very good way to tie flies, mostly because when you need to get into, when you need to get into tie stuff in back on the very back of the fly, it's going to be really hard to overcome this whole situation here. So keep your flies just kind of pinched in the very back of the barb like that. It gives you a lot more open spot to tie things in on the back of the hook. Okay, so. And then just again, you don't need to mash your jaws closed every single time. Find the sweet spot with your vise, put hooks in the right way, and they will never slip. All right, so now that we have our hook in the vise, let's just establish that we have the hook in the vise. We may want to put a bead head on this hook. So you don't put the bead head on after you've tied the fly. It goes on right now. So with this hook, if I wanted to put a bead on it, I would choose an appropriately sized bead. We're not going to go over that in this video, but as you get going, just know that there is a certain range of sizes of beads that will work with your hook. You can't just take a tiny hook and put a giant bead on it. It doesn't work that way. So there's a happy medium there. This is a little bit of an education piece, so ask if you can what bead size you want. This is size 10. I think this is like a 3.3 millimeter bead. So what I like to do, instead of like hold the hook in my hand and try to piece it all together, doesn't work the greatest that way. So what I'm going to do is I'll take my hook and I put it upside down in the vise like that. Then I take my bead, and on one side of the bead there's a big hole. On the other side there's a small hole. It's really hard to see. So I'm just going to roll it in my fingers until I find that small hole. Let's see, can you see the small hole? And then I'm going to take that and just kind of find the hook point and then let it kind of rest here. And then take the hook out. And now I'm going to put it in the vise just like that. Okay, so that's how to put a bead on. There are different ways to mess with slotted beads. We're not going to get into that right now. It's super easy, but just know that the bead goes on the hook, typically the small hole first, so that it catches up on the eye. Okay. Now we're going to talk about adding thread to your hook. Okay. So thread control is one of the most important things to learn as a fly tyer, because it will help you tie cleaner flies. So if you see the bobbin here, I like to keep the bobbin pretty parallel to the hook shank, okay? And in order for me to be able to do that, once I get this all threaded up, I'm going to take my finger and I'm going to let that bobbin rest on that first knuckle, okay? And then I'm going to grab it with my thumb, okay? So this position in my hand will allow me always to keep that bobbin parallel as I'm wrapping the thread, okay? If I have my bobbin like this and I'm wrapping like this, it's going to be harder to keep good thread control and placement. But if you always keep your bobbin somewhat parallel to the hook shank, that's great. Now, if you feel more comfortable holding the stem back here, fine, go for it. But I find it works best for me if I let that little joint rest here, grab it with my thumb, and then I can use my hand as the brake. So I don't use a fancy bobbin with a clutch. I just hold my bobbin like this. I use my whole hand as a brake, and then, just what I prefer. All right. So once you're ready to tie your fly, I'm going to take my thread, okay, and I'm going to come from behind the hook shank and kind of make a V like that, okay? So I'm behind the hook shank. I'm pulling my thread toward me, and I'm going to make a V, okay? You can kind of see that V. Now, without letting go of the tag end, and the tag end is going to be this little loose end here. Without letting go of the tag end, I'm going to start with my good hand placement on the bobbin, start wrapping forward. So as you can see, I'm wrapping with touching turns going forward. Now I'm not going like this. I don't think you have good control if you go really tight like that. And then also I don't have tons of thread out, so I have to use a lot of energy to tie. So I'm going to keep about, an inch to 2 inches, maybe 3. That's kind of a good zone for me. It'll save your shoulder, okay? So once you've gone forward, I'm just going to now start wrapping back on top of itself. And that thread is 100% tied in, so I can cut off my excess. Now when you start a fly, it's a general good idea to just kind of dress the hook. And this part right here is what tricks everybody. This little part where now, if I wrap, I'm going to catch my hook just like I've done here, okay? So with good bobbin placement in your hand, I'm going to come down, and when I'm going to hit this hook point, I'm just going to hit them with that Max Crosby swim move. Boom, I'm on the other side. And then you kind of get used to avoiding that hook point. And you can also just angle your thread like this, okay? So I'm still stacking up thread wraps side by side, but it's much more of an extreme angle, okay? So that's how to put your thread on your hook. Now, if you need to take your thread all the way to the front of the hook, there's no need to do touching turns all the way to the front, okay? So what you can do is just take your thread and do loose turns just to get your thread where it needs to be. Keep in mind, all this stuff isn't going to matter. Like, it doesn't have to look super clean because your fly is going to cover that up. The key with the thread, I think you lay down a thread base. It helps your fly, it prevents your fly from twisting on the fly as you fish it, okay? So that is how to start your thread. And in the next video, we're going to talk about how to tie materials in with your thread. But these little tips of holding your bobbin correctly, starting your thread correctly, will help you kind of lessen a little bit of the frustration of starting to tie flies. Let's say that we've got a fly tied. This actually is what you should practice before you tie any fly. It's the whip finish, okay? So here we have our fancy whip finisher, and there's really, it's kind of hard to explain how to do this knot. We have a really good short on our YouTube. We'll put a link in the description below that shows the whip finish knot in a little bit different angle that can be helpful. But with this one, I'm going to take my whip finish tool, and there is a rotation a sleeve on the bottom, like so. This body rotates. So if I hold it here, the whip finisher just spins around. Okay, so you need to know this as you get started with this tool. So when I go to tie the knot, I'm just going to grab it right here. So I have a hold of the stem and of the actual tool. Okay. So with some thread out, I'm going to take this tool and I'm going to push it into the thread and then bring the bobbin up on this little piece right here. Okay. So I'm going to make a little upside down V, if you will, or it's actually not upside down. That triangle's right side up, right, Spence? Yep. Okay. So that's how I'm working. So once I have the thread in the hook and in the little notch, I'm going to let go of the tool part, and now I just have the rotary part of the stem. Okay, so I'm holding it right here. So what I'm going to do two things. I'm going to take my bobbin and I'm going to move it so that my thread is parallel to the hook shank and pull it behind it like that. Okay, and all I did was pulled this rotary thing up. I just moved this up so that it's on top of the fly. For you, it looks like there's a number 4 out of thread. For me, it looks like a backward number 4. So now with this, I can move this bodkin now, or the bobbin a little bit toward me and a little bit down, and it will lock that knot right where I want it to be. All right, so to make it even more confusing, no, to simplify it, let's say that you've got this backward 4. All you're going to do is keeping the handle of this also parallel to your hook as much as you can. Just rotate this around, not using a lot of pressure, 3 to 5 times, and then when you're ready to be done with the knot, just go straight up with it. And see how that just kind of popped out of this little notch? That's a good thing. Maintaining tension with my left hand or my offhand. Now I'm going to pull that tension with my bodkin. Let's see if I can get that. I'm going to pull the tension out of the knot with my bodkin, and I'm going to take this part of the whip finisher, the point, and just slide that out of there. So in real speed, the whip finish looks like this. So I would recommend you doing just what I'm doing right now. You're just going to take a hook, put thread on it, and you're just going to practice this whip finish over and over and over. The reason why I'm telling you this is because there's nothing more frustrating than tying your first fly and then getting to the whip finish and totally choking on it. So anyway, that's how to put a hook in your vise. That's how to start your thread, and that is how to whip finish. Make sure to check out video number 4, where we're going to talk about how to tie in materials, we're going to talk about dubbing, and we're going to talk about how to wind hackle.